May mother-in-law love po.
Do you remember when I spoke about the little boy with the cowboy suit? Christmas, he came downstairs and he had the cowboy suit which he tried on. Well, there was another episode at a Christmas a couple of years later, and that was something that really could have been worse than it was, but it was not a happy time for that child. At Christmas time we always made our own trimmings, our own decorations, and we made paper chains. Paper chains were crepe paper often, but sometimes it was just newspaper cut into strips about that wide and about 4 or 5 inches long and made into a loop, which was glued at the one end and the paper was put across and it made a loop. Then the next one would be through that and looped again until we got enough to do a whole room with paper chains going across the ceiling zigzag. After that we had all sorts of things. We had a tree, a real tree. Let's go back to the paper chains a minute, because if we haven't got glue, we used to use flour and water, and people stuck paper on walls with that as well as doing paper chains. But now I can go back to the Christmas tree. We used to have a small Christmas tree. It was always a real one then, not many were artificial, and we'd put little glass baubles on, different shapes and designs, bright colours so that it looked nice on the tree. And then after that there would be candles put on, tiny candles like cake candles, and they would be fitted into a little tiny fitting that was on the end of a small peg, and that would clip onto the branch of the tree. And then my dad would light them, and he'd stay with us while we got the candles lit, and he'd put the candles out when it was time for us to go to bed, and then he would go into the other room. One day my brother decided he wanted to have the candles lit again. I didn't want him to do it because Dad had put it out and it wasn't what he wanted. But yes, he got something from the fire and lit the candle and the tree. The tree went up in flames. I went out to fetch a bucket of water, threw the bucket of water over the tree and all over the newly decorated wall. Always were decorated for Christmas. All over the wall was water that was black. It was slack water. Slack was the residue, the powder that was left from coal. And we'd get the bucket of coal, put the coal on the fire, and the bits that were left were slack. And we'd use that to put on top to keep the fire in if we were going out. But it wasn't a good idea to put it on a wall. My dad heard the kerfuffle, and he was not the sort of person that was angry very often. He was quite placid. But not that day. He was really angry with us. And my little brother decided he wasn't going to be shouted at anymore. He went out onto the step out of the house, onto the front doorstep, which was directly onto the pavement. And at that time, the men were just coming out of work. This very pretty, curly-haired, blonde little boy with lovely blue eyes was crying and crying, and he couldn't tell them why he was crying. And the people, as they were going past him, were giving him pennies and tuppences. because they felt sorry for him, and they didn't know why he was crying, but they just wanted to cheer him up a bit. And he was crying because he'd set fire to the Christmas tree and he wasn't going to be allowed to have another one that year. And that was the tale of my little brother and his tree.